I have two Saturns, but my friend has none. Well, back in February, we had been spending a lot of time checking Facebook Marketplace for good deals on cheap S-Series Saturns. On February 3rd, we found ourselves traveling to Marion, South Dakota. For $600, we had ourselves a 2002 SL2. Why so cheap?
Saturn's 4-speed automatic transaxle.
Yeah, the transmission had some issues, but $600 is $600. When we first got the car and drove it home, it would shift violently and would sometimes refuse to shift into fourth gear. And then there was the reverse gear. Well, I didn't get a recording of it. When we shifted it into reverse while stationary, there would be a 2-second pause and then... or something like that. So for the first few days, it was kept at Saturn of Brookings. After a few days of research, my friend determined that it was the electronic solenoids in the transmission's valve body that were going bad. These solenoids are responsible for redirecting the transmission fluids to actually shift the gears, so bad solenoids are known to cause violent and inconsistent shifts. With this dilemma, we found ourselves at the 1998 Saturn wagon again in Wes Auto Salvage. While it was a complete gamble, it was assumed that the solenoids in this SW2 were probably going to have more life in them than what we were currently dealing with, and so the disassembly began. You first have to remove the battery and the battery tray, and under it is the cover for the valve body itself. After disconnecting the control cable, the bolts around the cover can be removed. The valve body itself has many different bolts, and only a select few must be removed in order to remove the complete assembly without separating it into smaller parts. There is a video guide on YouTube that shows which bolts to remove, along with the rest of the process, which I have linked below. Now, we pulled a valve body from one of Saturn's station wagon models. However, all S-Series Saturns are built exactly the same, with the exception of trim level. Trim level 1 S-Series Saturns have the base single overhead cam engine. However, level 2 Saturns have a more powerful dual overhead cam variant. Because of the increased performance, level 2 Saturns are geared differently and thus have different transmissions. But since both our SL and the SW we pulled from are of trim level 2, they have the same transmissions, so the valve bodies are compatible. That being said, I would not recommend swapping valve bodies from Saturns that have large age gaps. Over time, Saturn has changed minor aspects of the drivetrains, and so very early transmissions could possibly act a bit different than much later ones. I would suggest trying to source a valve body from a car that is the same year or as close to the same year as the one you are working on. For this operation, we decided to buy the whole valve body rather than replacing the individual solenoids. For only $30, plus another $20 for a new gasket, we were able to solve the problem. After this, the transmission still shifted a little funny, but it became much calmer. It was discovered that a reset of the PCM was in order because it needed to relearn the new solenoids. After the relearn process, it became smooth as butter. While this Saturn was fitted with the 124 horsepower LL0 engine that comes with the second trim level, the rest of the car is pretty basic. The original owner did not buy the $1,500 power window power mirror cruise control power upgrade, nor did they get the fog lights, sunroof, or anti-lock brakes, but they at least got the CD player radio and air conditioning system. Besides a few stains, the interior itself is pretty clean. The previous owner redid the headliner himself, and he also 3D printed a new center console cover. Also, nearly all of the keyholes and locking mechanisms were broken in some way, except for those in the rear passenger doors. The next order of business is to replace the driver's seat. Besides a bit of torn fabric, the angle adjustment was thoroughly dysfunctional. This made for an uncomfortable driving experience. My solution was to pay another visit to Ronner's Auto Parts in Wilmer, Minnesota. Of the 75 different Saturns, we found a good condition SL1 that only had around 40,000 miles on it. It is an SL1 seat, so it doesn't have the adjustable headrest, but my friend didn't really care. One of his vents was also broken, so I sourced a new one from a different SL1. Besides the seat and vent, he also grabbed a second vent piece, ignition keyhole cover, and one of those medieval weapons used to remove the bolts from the tires. The keyhole cover went on fine, and after a pair of 7mm bolts, the side vent assembly was swapped. After the acquisition of a new E10 Torx socket and a bit of tomfoolery involving a monoblock lawn chair, the new seat was installed. The final operation, which was done as a preventative maintenance measure, was to clean the carbon buildup from the throttle body. Because of 1970s businessman and his Environmental Protection Agency, a little bit of the exhaust is looped back into the intake, so naturally things can get pretty disgusting. The throttle body itself can become sticky and jumpy, and the idle air servo motor can get gummed up, which will cause high idling. It is best to mechanically remove the thick stuff first, then spray brake cleaner to loosen the rest. You could take the whole thing apart and do a deep clean on it, but this usually solves the problem. By this time, it had been about 2 months. My friend has been using this as a main vehicle since we fixed the transmission issues. While S-Series cars tend to be cheap and come with many issues, they were built to last. Many later Saturns from the 2000s were rebadged of other GM cars, but the original S-Series was designed and built by Saturn. Even the frames and engines were Saturn-made. In addition, the cars were designed to be user-friendly and easily serviceable. Because they were made in the millions, parts are not hard to find these days. With all of this in mind, it is very easy to repair and restore even the most dilapidated units for relatively low cost. After all the fun we had with the ice blue 2002 Saturn SL2 from Marion, it was time to cash in our labor. With an extra 70 days and 1,228 miles, the Saturn was sold on April 13, 2024 for $1,400. Seeing that my friend only spent about $900 total on the thing, it was a pretty rewarding profit. Of course, now that I got him hooked on Saturns, he couldn't last a week without one. So 8 days later, we went to Iowa and he bought an Ion. But that's a story for another time.